promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar and Conakry and 1 p.m. in Abuja. Good afternoon and thank you for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM in Dakar, Senegal, and around the world at wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink. I am Atiewin Imbila.
And I am Sankule Janko.
Let's start with the headline stories. Supporters of former Senegalese president hail his global influence as the new UN chief selection enters a decisive phase.
For me, he is the ideal candidate to tackle today's challenges.
Macky Sall is a unifier. He stands for everyone, and we stand for him.
Bissau-Guinean transitional prime minister arrives in Conakry for a 3-day walking visit.
In the Gambia, lawmakers undergo training to strengthen transitional justice.
And the Ghanaian government engages South African officials over alleged xenophobic attack against nationals.
They are saying we foreigners are taking their jobs and then we are taking their women. That is their main problem.
Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Many thanks for joining us. Let's start in Senegal. The Senegalese former President Macky Sall, a candidate for the position of United Nations Secretary General, faced his public hearing on Wednesday in New York. During the session, he presented his vision for the UN governance to member states, focusing on institutional reform and strengthening multilateralism. The hearing, broadcast live on the UN channel, was closely followed in Dakar, Senegal, by members of his political party.
But among the population's support for Sall's bid is divided, with those opposing his candidacy citing governance and rights violations documented during his presidency. Well, Imo Edit reports.
Si je suis élu, bien sûr, secrétaire général, je compte poursuivre.
At the headquarters of the APR, the party of former Senegalese President Macky Sall, hundreds of supporters and senior officials gathered to follow his grand hearing at the United Nations. A light screen had been set up in the main hall for the live broadcast from New York. At the end of the proceedings, Ahmed Carr, a youth leader within the party, said he was encouraged by Macky Sall's governance vision presented at the UN.
For me, he is the ideal candidate to tackle today's challenges, especially at a time when there are many conflicts. The UN needs someone like him, particularly on multilateralism, because the world needs peace and development. Macky Sall can engage with leaders like Putin, Donald Trump, and Middle East, and also France.
Another party member, Henriette Mbaye, expressed hope that Macky Sall's profile would convince UN member states.
Macky Sall is a unifier. He stands for everyone, and we stand for him. We support him fully. I believe that if he takes the reins, the whole world will be proud of him. He's a hard worker and someone who listens to everyone.
Some APR officials also voiced regret over the official position of the Senegalese state, which has not endorsed the former president's candidacy. Seydou Gueye, former minister and senior APR figure, commented on the issue.
It would have been more appropriate for the authorities to support Macky Sall's candidacy. For me, his victory would be a victory for Senegal, the only African country in the race. But that responsibility lies with the head of state, whose primary role is to represent Senegal, defend its citizens, and support them when they seek opportunities or face challenges.
Macky Sall could become the third African to hold the post of UN Secretary General. Alongside the former Senegalese leader, 3 other candidates are also in the race. The next UN chief is expected to take office in January 2027.
Imo Edet reporting. While staying on the United Nations top job, how exactly does the process of selecting UN Secretary General progress from the public hearing stage? Well, the question comes as the race now moves behind closed doors at the Security Council, where major world powers will work to agree on a single candidate.
Let me give you a breakdown of who the candidates are. We have Michelle Bachelet, we have Raphael Grossi, and we have Rebecca Grinspan, and then, of course, former Senegalese President Macky Sall. Now, they have all made their case and now await the outcome. Augustine Colley provides details on how this process will be.
The informal interactive dialogues or public hearings for candidates seeking to succeed the United Nations Secretary General have wrapped up in New York. The procedure has become a key part of the selection process since its introduction in 2016 to promote transparency within the organization. 4 candidates are in the running to replace Antonio Guterres, namely former Chilean President Michelle Bachelet, IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi, UNTAD Secretary General Rebecca Ganspan, and former Senegalese President Macky Sall. Over several hours, each candidate presented their vision before the 193 UN member states and civil society representatives in sessions broadcast live online. The process, now open to the public, aims to shed light on a selection procedure that was once largely conducted behind closed doors. The next step now lies with the Security Council, which will hold internal consultations to agree on a candidate before forwarding its recommendation to the General Assembly. The Assembly will then make the final appointment for a 5-year term, renewable once. While the process is more transparent, observers note that political considerations remain decisive. The informal principle of regional rotation, often mentioned, is not legally binding. The succession to Antonio Guterres is shaping up to be both more open and still deeply political.
Augustine Colley filed that report.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Thanks for staying with us. Now on the diplomatic front, Prime Minister of Guinea-Bissau, Indilio Vieira Te, on Wednesday arrived in Conakry for a 72-hour working and friendship visit. The trip was focused on strengthening bilateral cooperation between the two neighboring countries, particularly in mining, infrastructure, defense, and security. The Bissau-Guinean leader is scheduled to meet Guinea's President Mamadi Doumbouya later today. Usman Umar has the rest of the details.
This is Ilidio Vieira Te's second visit to Guinea since his appointment as Prime Minister of Guinea-Bissau. The Prime Minister is using this trip to Conakry to deepen cooperation with Guinea, with a focus on mining, transport and infrastructure, but above all, on security and defense.
Guinea played a very important role in the liberation of our country, Guinea-Bissau. We can never forget that. We have a duty to the Guinean people. We came here to say thank you. We arrived with a large delegation to work with the Prime Minister in various sectors such as natural resources, energy, sports, culture and education. We are here to explain how we want to revive cooperation between the two countries.
For Guinea's Prime Minister, the two countries share strong ties of friendship and good neighborliness. He says this visit reflects the commitment of both heads of state to further strengthen these relations.
We are working hand in hand with the government of the Republic of Guinea-Bissau to revive our cooperation and bring a new momentum that will further strengthen ties between our two countries. In the mining sector, we are developing infrastructure to connect both nations, facilitate trade and explore other areas of cooperation that will bring our peoples even closer together. This reflects the aspiration of our populations as well as the will and commitment of our two heads of state.
Speaking to the press, Oriba also stressed that given the current sub-regional context, reinforcing security along the shared border has become a key priority for both countries. Guinea, emerging from 4 years of military transition, could also support its Bissau-Guinean neighbor in returning to constitutional order.
That report was by WADR's Conakry correspondent Cherno Alpha Ibrahima Balde and voiced by Usman Umar.
In Togo, visiting the French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot is set to meet with the government officials and civil society actors. Talks will focus on terrorism in the Sahel and the broader political situation in the sub-region. Discussions will also cover preparations for an upcoming humanitarian conference with a focus on international humanitarian law. Barrot and Togolese authorities are also expected to review bilateral cooperation supported by the French Development Agency.
Now, this visit comes as President of Togo's Council of Ministers for Nyasingbe plays an increasingly important mediating role between France and countries of Central Sahel. Togo recently hosted a high-level meeting on its new Sahel strategy, bringing together representatives from ECOWAS, the African Union, the AES bloc, the United Nations, and other international partners. In the meantime, Niger is ready to normalize its relations with Benin, according to the country's interior minister. For the past 3 years, the land border between the two countries has remained closed, with diplomatic and economic ties under strain.
Now, following the election of a new president in Benin, economic stakeholders in Niamey are hoping for a revival of relations between Niamey and Cotonou. Christopher Atichu reports.
In an interview with Nigerian television, Interior Minister General Mohamed Tumba said Niger is not opposed to a return to normal relations with Benin. He added, however, that Niamey is seeking several assurances.
Talon is being used as a proxy. There has been a change in leadership in Benin, but what matters now is a clear show of good faith. Benin should openly state that it is not serving foreign interests, particularly those of France, and that it is not allowing its territory to be used as a base to target neighboring countries.
For several years, Nigerian authorities have accused Benin of hosting foreign forces, allegedly aiming to destabilize the current regime, claims constantly denied by Beninese officials. As part of efforts to strengthen security, the Interior Ministry has announced plans to recruit nearly 10,000 personnel to boost the National Guard and the police. General Mohamed Tumba says,
These recruitments are aimed at closing the gap in our personnel. The goal is to strengthen our security coverage across the country, ensure we have enough forces on the ground, and effectively address the security challenges we face.
By reinforcing its military capacity while maintaining a firm diplomatic stance, Niamey aims to consolidate its new security strategy and reshape its international relations.
Christopher Atichi with that report by our Niamey correspondent Yakuba Habibulai. Meanwhile, in the Gambia, lawmakers are receiving training to help advance the country's transitional justice process. The workshop in Banjul comes amid growing calls to implement long-delayed reforms recommended by the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission. Organized by the Victims Center for Human Rights, the workshop also focuses on the African Union's transitional justice policy and the government's white paper on TRRC recommendations. As WDR Sang Donald Mendy reports, the 4-day exercise, which began on Monday, ends today, April 23.
The organizers say the workshop is designed to strengthen lawmakers' understanding of transitional justice frameworks and their role in ensuring effective implementation. The meeting comes amid growing frustration among victims as delays continue to stall access to justice, reparations, and closure. The chairperson of Tango, Yadikon Eribunjai, says the slow pace is taking a toll on survivors.
Victims and their families must not continue to bear the burden of delay. We call on increased budgetary allocations towards the reparations program.
The training also aims to boost legislative oversight and speed up the transitional justice process, which remains incomplete despite progress in truth-telling. Deputy Clerk of the National Assembly, Buba E.M. Jatta, stresses the role of lawmakers.
The National Assembly remains committed to establishing a governance framework where justice is an accessible right and institutional integrity is paramount.
European Union Ambassador to the Gambia, Immaculada Roca Equatores, says while the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission marked a major milestone, implementation is now the real test, as many victims continue to wait for reparations and accountability. Pressure is mounting on the authorities to deliver justice. The initiative, funded by the African Transitional Justice Legacy Fund, also seeks to raise awareness of African Union policy commitments and the government's obligations. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Sangdona Mendy, reporting from Banjul.
Let's continue talking about public welfare, this time in Nigeria, because the Social Insurance Trust Fund is pushing to close the social security gap affecting millions of informal workers across the country. This forms part of the conversation as a regional social protection seminar gets underway in Abuja. Our Abuja correspondent Yechenu Sasetu has the details.
The seminar, organized in collaboration with the International Social Security Association, has brought together policymakers, labor representatives, and development partners to address gaps in social security coverage. Nigeria Country Director of the International Labour Organization, Vanessa Falamoyo, highlights existing challenges.
One of the most pressing challenges is limited coverage of the social protection system. And then another issue that we are seeing as a challenge is institutional and some of the governance constraints. Another one that is a constraint is financial limitations.
These gaps are the reason for the gathering. Managing Director of the Nigeria Social Insurance Trust Fund, Oluwaseun Fale, says the theme of the seminar, improving inclusiveness and accessibility of social security services through effective communication in West Africa, focuses on expanding coverage.
Accessibility challenges us to think how services reach workers whose employment falls outside of the traditional structures. Inclusiveness requires that women, persons with disabilities, migrant workers, and those in informal and non-standard forms of work are not treated as marginal.
Secretary General of the International Social Security Association, Marcelo Abiramiya Katanu, also highlights the critical role of social security.
We will have ample opportunity to exchange and network, and we will send a key message about the commitment of social security to reach out all population groups.
The seminar continues today, with stakeholders expected to propose practical solutions to improve access and strengthen systems across the region. For WADR, Yechenu Sasetu in Abuja.
You're listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM in Dakar, Senegal. We're also online at wadr.org and across social media platforms at WADR English. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Supporters of former Senegalese president hail his global influence as the new UN chief selection enters a decisive phase.
Bissau Guinean Transitional Prime Minister arrives in Conakry for a 3-day walking visit.
In the Gambia, lawmakers undergo training to strengthen transitional justice.
And the Ghanaian government engages South African officials over alleged xenophobic attack against nationals. We also have the press review, guest interview, and sport news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Let's now talk Ghana-South Africa relations, because the Ghanaian government has intensified diplomatic engagements with South Africa following an alleged xenophobic incident targeting Ghanaians. Viral videos circulating online appear to show Ghanaian nationals being attacked. Since high-level talks between Accra and Pretoria began, South African authorities have promised a full investigation.
While further briefings are expected for African diplomats as concerns grow over the safety of foreign nationals in South Africa. From Accra, Nadi Dictator reports.
The diplomatic move was initiated by Ghana's Foreign Affairs Minister Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa with his South African counterpart Ronald Lamola after the videos began circulating online. According to the minister, the footage, widely shared on social media, prompted urgent engagement to verify the situation and ensure the safety of Ghanaians living in South Africa. Michael Ishen, speaking on behalf of concerned Ghanaians living in South Africa, said hostility towards foreigners is not a new development but an entrenched issue.
This thing has been happening for a very long time. We keep on securing ourselves in this country. They are saying we foreigners are taking their jobs and then we are taking their women. That is their main problem.
Following the discussions, the South African government expressed concern over the development and pledged immediate action, including a full-scale investigation into the incidents. Authorities in Pretoria are also expected to brief African diplomatic missions as part of efforts to provide clarity and reassurance. On the ground, Ghana's High Commission in South Africa, led by Benjamin Kwashi, has been coordinating with local officials and engaging affected nationals. The mission has successfully located the main individual featured in the viral video and is providing consular assistance. Officials say the individual is safe and no Ghanaian fatalities have been recorded so far. The minister has urged calm among Ghanaians, reaffirming government's commitment to protecting its citizens both at home and abroad under President John Dramani Mahama. Both countries are now working through diplomatic channels to establish the facts around the incidents while maintaining cooperation and reinforcing broader African solidarity. For WDR, Nadidi Teti, Accra.
This is the newspaper review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the newspaper review.
The newspaper review.
And today we are in Ghana, where correspondent Na Dede Tete brings us the stories in the newspapers. Greetings and welcome to the newspaper review segment. We'll start off with the Daily Graphic newspaper. Cabinet approves visa waiver for 3 countries. Workplace HIV policy launched to improve healthcare access, and Ghana unveils documentary register to preserve heritage. The Daily Guide newspaper front page. Buffer stock trial. Court summons Yoko officials over seized gadgets. Assembly members deny Adamus petition claims, and Kumasi businessman beats girlfriend to death. Ghana must build economic buffers, Nana OSIWA says. He's a member of parliament. The Daily Post. Foreign Affairs Minister engages South Africa over reported xenophobic attacks on Ghanaians. Ghana Medical Trust Fund meets Parliamentary Select Committee on Health. Energy Committee of Parliament commends NPA's openness. A Minerals Income Investment Fund records 5.43 billion cedis in mineral revenue inflows. The Overseer newspaper resigned before seeking party positions, as Yedwin Ketia reminds government appointees. Also here, NPA bill to introduce major reforms in petroleum pricing structure. The Daily Democrat, businessman seeks help to reclaim factory. Also here, CSOs demand independent prosecutor to fight corruption. BNFT, Ejimera in Kukonketenkete jobs for the boys. There's a question being asked. Also here, climate risk modeling program takes off. That should be it for the newspaper review segment. It's back to you in the studio. Thank you very much, Na Dede Tete.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Well, our guest interview today features Professor Saliu John, a political scientist and lecturer at the St. Job University in Dakar. Well, he says his perspective on the public hearings for the United Nations Secretary General position, which concluded on Wednesday in New York.
Now, despite the divided support for the former Senegalese president's bid for the top job at home in Senegal, Professor John believes Macky Sall's selection offers Africa and other developing countries better representation. He explains.
I'm really proud to see an African vying for this post. And we all know that Africa really needs someone there. We all know that the Secretary General is not going to be there for Africa, but at least having an African leading the UN will be something very good, because the person there will, I'm sure, will take into consideration all the different problems that Africa is facing, especially in relation to international relations, how geopolitics is going on, how geostrategy is going on, and also in helping solve all the conflict, especially in the Sahel region, and also see how to reinforce democracy, but especially have the African voice heard at the UN, especially seeing to it that African people have a seat at the United Nations Security Council. I think when hearing Macky Sall speaking, there is a sense of pride, and then it's just like making Pan-Africanism re-emerge again. And this really the sense of pride that I have. And listening to him, that I see he is someone who really knows how the UN function, and he also knows the different challenges, not only globally, but also the challenges that are relating to the one African countries are facing.
And like you rightly stated, Professor John, Macky Sall, during his presentation yesterday at the UN headquarters, did actually say what he would achieve. One of them is making sure that multilateralism thrives, and also looking at reviewing the existing financial architecture, also working to protect vulnerable countries most exposed to climate change. These are among other issues that he did mention. Do you think he can achieve all of this?
When we look at multilateralism, we only look at the concept of something that is really real. But multilateralism, the way it functions globally, is just an illusion. We only have a group of countries that are leading the world. Whenever we talk about international communities, we are under the impression that, we have all the voices of the countries globally, but it's not the case. We only have the voices of few countries that are being prevailed. But I think listening to him, we see that actually he's someone who really understands what multilateralism should be and how also it should function. And he even said in his speech, he's not going to be someone who will be siding with one group or another, but he will be someone who will be listening. And I was really impressed by his capacity to make dialogue prevail, but also to listen, but also to find balance.
Well, Professor Saliu John is a political science lecturer at the Sheikh Anta Diop University, Dakar.
Let's now bring you sports news. We're starting with the African Cup of Nations 2027, and it's undergoing uncertainty as delays raise doubts about the readiness in co-hosts Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. A critical inspection by the Confederation of Africa Football (CAF) flagged major gaps in stadiums and infrastructure, with Ugandan venues below the required standard and key projects behind the schedule. Now, with time tightening, relocation, including a possible move to South Africa, is being considered as uncertainty continues to build.
Meanwhile, the countdown to FIFA World Cup 2026 is intensifying, with FIFA releasing more tickets just 50 days before the kick-off as of yesterday. Co-hosted by the United States, Mexico, and Canada, the tournament will feature 104 matches, while tickets are on sale on a first-come, first-served basis, with more releases expected before the July 19 final. Gianni Infantino says over 5 million tickets are already sold, with about 2 million still available as demand continues to rise.
And we have come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thanks for listening. Many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Maudo Ju for the technical assistance.
Well, do interact with us via our social media platforms, X, Instagram, and Facebook at WADR English. Well, coming up is a repeat broadcast of Enviros Scope. Well, CV Wedrogo comes live at 1 p.m. with Info Chevo, a comprehensive news bulletin in French. I am Sankula Jibril Janko.
And I am Atiewin Invila. Good afternoon.
We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County, and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Baft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio Pad in Damango and Royals FM in Wenchi. Thank you all for listening to Newslink.